name is Sven Akesson. Now you're probably wondering where I got a name like Sven. Well, I was born in Sweden. I came over in 1952 when I was 5 years old, and then I learned how to speak English at 5. And my parents, we all came over together. My father wanted a better life, and he came here and he worked hard. And I grew up in the schools here, just like you. And I probably went to school at your age, probably 65 years ago. I was your age. So I am so glad to be here. I'm with a group called the Freedom Committee, and I'm one of the members who speaks in schools. That is our major job. Most of us are retired, so we have a lot more time to devote to schools. And we have some World War II veterans, Korean veterans, Vietnam veterans, Iraqi veterans, Afghanistan veterans. And we all take turns and we all go to several schools and speak about our military experience and how we had it. So I am a veteran. I'm going to have to remove my pictures here in a moment. Oh, we still have more children coming. Okay. You know, when I was in the Army, a lot of other veterans couldn't say my name. They called me Seven, just like the number 7. And a lot of my friends still do call me that. And actually, you adults would probably remember the name of that bicycle called Schwinn. I even had that name when I was younger. So I've had all kinds of names. Okay, the first picture here, most of my pictures are large, just a few of them are small, but as you can see, I was about 6 years old here in their backyard, and my first bicycle. I love that bicycle. I went all over the place. Now, I was also a scout, Cub Scout there, went through all the scouts, and that helped me a lot to get through those young years and learn how to be a man and how to do the right thing. When I was in high school, I had a beautiful car. It was a 57 Pontiac 2-door, and I had a GTO engine in it. And every veteran, before they go in the military, most of us have to give up our cars because we're in the military for several years. And I had to sell it. I still miss that beautiful car. This is basic training. After a long day of carrying a rifle in a backpack, we used to have to run and march for several hours to get up our stamina and be a really healthy soldier. Most of these veterans, or I should say maybe about half the veterans that went to Vietnam were drafted. Drafted means you were forced to go in the military because they needed so many of us. About 2.9 million Americans went to Vietnam, and I was one of those. I was going to get drafted, so I joined. And before I joined, I had learned how to fly airplanes. I loved airplanes, and also I was a mechanic for an airline. So I worked on airplanes, I flew airplanes. Then I was going to get drafted, so I decided, well, why don't I be a pilot? So I'm glad I did. And this is the entrance of the flight school in Fort Walters, Texas. And 40,000 pilots were trained at this facility. Go ahead. I was in flight school for 9 months. The first month, we did not fly. All we had was academics. And they were really hard on us. Even though we were already in shape from basic training, they had to develop our mentality to be really strong, to take a lot of pressure. So one of the things was we had to keep a locker with everything perfect. Couldn't have any hangings, everything had to be in a perfect place, and they inspected us every day. This is the class I was in, just like you have a class, and you'll have a graduation class when you do retire. This was our class. We had almost 40 of us in this class. And they were graduating over 200 pilots a month, every 2 weeks. So they had several classes at one time. We had 3 major airports that we flew out of in flight training. Every little dot you see in there is a helicopter. And so if you multiply those by 3, we had over 1,200 helicopters for training. And probably this one here, we had about 500 in this airport. This is the first helicopter I flew. Scared the heck out of me. Really did, even though I flew airplanes, and it was totally different. It only weighed about half of a compact car. Half. And it had a 4-cylinder engine, and it really scared me. But it was a great thing to learn how to fly. And you soloed. Solo means that the instructor would get out of the helicopter, and he would let you fly on your own. And that took about anywhere from 8 to 12 hours of training. And one of those maneuvers that you had to do was an auto rotation, and that is when the engine quit. You had to learn how to fly that helicopter and land it without hurting the helicopter with the engine off. Just like you would push a windmill through the air on the stick, the rotor blades would keep on going. But it went down really fast. So all those maneuvers at the bottom just before you touch the ground had to be right. Go ahead. This is still in Mineral Wells, Texas, next to the Fort Walters. And the reason I put this in there, because this sign was at a hotel next to where we would fly. And if you soloed, the other pilots would take you under these rotor blades and throw you in the pool at the Holiday Inn. So that was your initiation. So I was one of the last few guys to get dunked in the water, but I was so proud, even though I was wet. And it says, under these helicopter blades are have passed the finest helicopter pilots in the world. So I'm really proud of that. This is now a museum outside of Mineral Wells, a Vietnam museum. Okay, most of you are not familiar maybe where Vietnam is, but it's in the pink there at the left, just below China and Laos and Cambodia, across from the Philippines. And there were a North and a South Vietnam at that time. This is South Vietnam, and the military decided to break South Vietnam into 4 sections. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it was 1 Corps, 2 Corps, 3 Corps, 4 Corps. And the 1 Corps they ended up calling I Corps. I don't know quite the history on that, but I served in 2 Corps. And that was right in the middle there where it says Pleiku on K. This was kind of a mountainous area, and it was a lot cooler than the southern part of Vietnam, South Vietnam. So I was fortunate there, and I occasionally had to wear a jacket in the morning to go to the helicopter. Good. This was the 4th Infantry Division base camp there in Pleiku when I got there. And you can see there's the hangar there right in the middle, and all those other hooches around there. And I lived in one of those close to the helicopters. I lived about 100 yards from the helicopter, so if I was scrambled and had to be there in a hurry, I could make it there just in a couple, 3 minutes. Fortunately, for me, as a helicopter pilot, we could stay in the base camp at night. We flew in the jungles during the day, and we flew troops most of the time, and supplies, and also medevac, which is air ambulance if we were needed. But at night, once we put the helicopters where they had to be worked on and taken care of, I was fortunate to be able to live in the base camp, where it was a lot more protection at night. maybe rockets and some grenades thrown at us at night. Where we slept, there were a lot of sandbags protecting us. So we felt pretty well protected at night. This was a sign in front of our operation, D Troop, 1st Squadron, 10th Cavalry. The reason I put 10th Cavalry on here, that's who I was with, and a lot of history behind the 10th Cavalry. And after the Civil War, many of the slaves couldn't find work, so they were offered jobs in the military. And the enlisted men decided that they should go in the military. And the 9th Cavalry and the 10th Cavalry were mostly black slaves, and they did a very good job. And they also called them buffalo soldiers, because the natives called the buffalo soldiers, natives, I mean the Indians, called them buffalo soldiers because their hair were very similar to a buffalo. That's the first helicopter I flew in Vietnam. That's a Cobra gunship.
Wow.
And it's a little bit dark on the front there, so you kind of hard to see the guns, but you can see the rockets on my left side. That's a really fast helicopter. That'll fly about 220 miles an hour in a dive to shoot those rockets if necessary. And they protected us in a lot of our missions. They flew alongside us and would cover us, even though the helicopter that I later flew had guns, but they were nothing compared to the Cobra. So I flew one mission in the Cobra and decided I didn't really care to fly them. So I ended up going to the next helicopter. Go ahead. This was the major helicopter flown in Vietnam. Over 7,000 of these were built, and half of those were destroyed. But it was a very good helicopter, kind of like a large family van. It would hold 2 pilots, 2 machine gunners, and we could put, normally we would have 7 troops on board. We would take them into combat, and they would get off the helicopter and do their mission and scare the enemy and try to get them out of the area. And then we would come back later and pick them up. So we had a total of over 11 people on the helicopter at one time, and we also had about 1,200 pounds of fuel. In aviation, we use pounds instead of gallons, because pounds that has to do with weight, so everything is based on weight, on what you can do. And being the weather was a little bit of the warm side, you had to really be careful. We had just enough power to get the job done. We were at maximum power most of the time we flew. Here I am, and you can notice there I have a helmet, eye protection, I have headphones inside the helmet, got a microphone that I speak on. It was very noisy inside the helicopter, so we would have to talk to each other through an intercom system. That's what the microphone was for, and also the headsets inside the helmet, so you could hear each other. We also had radios where we'd talk to folks on the ground, like the infantry folks, and also a radio that would talk to the control towers, and then another radio that we would talk to each other in the other helicopters. We got quite a few radios on board. And when you first get there, it gets pretty noisy. You're not really sure what you're listening to, but after a while, you can really learn just by hearing, and you know just what's going on. And when you first get there as a pilot, you take a co-pilot seat. Even though you've been through flight school with over 200 hours, you still have a lot to learn fighting the war. So I was a co-pilot for about 400 hours, and then later on I became an aircraft commander. And also you see there below the chin, one part is just a strap that goes into the chin with a piece of leather on it, but below that, you see a square section that goes all the way down. We call it a chicken plate. It's an armored plating, and it goes in front of your chest and you strap it on before you get inside the helicopter. and if any bullets should come in that area, it will deflect them. Also, the seats weighed over 200 pounds, and it was fully armored to protect you in case of any bullets coming through the cockpit. Of course, parts of you were still exposed, but most of your body was protected. This is one of our observation helicopters, probably one of the most loved helicopters during the Vietnam War. We called it Loach, L-O-A-C-H, Light Observation Helicopter. And this would carry one pilot and one door gunner. And they would go out with our unit on a mission, and we would have 3 of these, and 4 of the UEs with their troops, and two gunships. So we would go out with 7 of us, 9 of us. We would come out at one time to fly a mission, and we would look for the enemy and chase them out of there where they weren't supposed to be. And he also had protection there. You can see the machine gun hanging out. And the gunner will be there. He'll have one leg outside the helicopter, and then he'll hold his machine gun. And if he needs to use it, he'll be able to protect the helicopter. Also, you see the red cans in the bottom of that box on the left side? Those are red smoke grenades. And whenever he made contact with the enemy, he would easily grab one of those smoke grenades, pull it, and throw it. And that would indicate to the gunships who were flying at 500 feet above, that would indicate to them where to shoot. That would be the target for them. Now, they would move away from the area, and they'd find a place for us to put our troops in the ground, and the UEs would come in and drop the troops, and they would go scour the area and see what we found on the ground and chase the enemy away. Go ahead. This is also a scout pilot. This came later on in the late 70s. A lot of politics involved. This was also had the same function as the last one you saw. This was more of a compact car, in my opinion. The one earlier was more of a sports car. And it did the job, but it wasn't quite as great as the first one I showed you. Go ahead. This is 3 UEs, and this is formation. This is how we flew most of the time in formation together. Now, you don't see the 4th one because I'm in the 4th one flying, and we're taking the picture. And you can look in there, and you can see the troops on the floor. Some of them sat in seats, but most of them sat on the floor. And that way they could get out of the helicopter real quick. But we were fortunate to take this picture and get 3 of us so close together, and it really is an awesome picture. And I'm really proud to be a pilot in the 4th aircraft that took the picture. So this is one of my favorite pictures. This is one of our troops. I kind of put him in the picture because he was special. He was a football player and drafted. And we called him Tiny. He was 6'5", 300 pounds. In very good shape. And in this picture you can see he carried a machine gun, not just a regular gun, but a machine gun. He carried over 300 rounds of ammo. And when we dropped him off in the helicopter in the landing zone, he moved. He ran so fast because he had to get away from the helicopter. They all did, but he was special. He was just the epitome of one of our troops. Again, a picture of our helicopters rolling in for fuel. When you're in trail like this, you have to be careful so you don't get below the rotor plane of the helicopter ahead of you. So you have to stay above it a little bit, otherwise you get involved in this rotor wash, and it makes it really uncomfortable. So you want to get smooth air. That's kind of a neat picture again. Fourth aircraft design. Okay. The instrument panel. Very simple instrument panel. It's for 2 pilots, one left, one right. And one thing you'll notice here, besides the instruments, is ashtrays. Back then, 50 years ago, many of us smoked, and they put ashtrays in the helicopter. So, of course, we don't do that anymore, because now we know it's bad for you. But I thought that was interesting when I picked that picture. Oh, it's got ashtrays in it. And you can see some of the radio gear on the bottom there that we use. Okay. This is two of our observation helicopters, Loaches. Might be a little hard to see, but they're inside, they're skimming the trees. They're flying around and they're looking for the enemy. And we are covering them with the gunships and also the troops flying around, and be ready to put them on the ground as soon as possible, chase the enemy out. Beautiful country there. Too bad there was a war. Sometimes our helicopters broke down. And you can see the bottom there is a picture of the Huey. It's one of the ones I flew. And occasionally they get shot up or they just break down like a car does. And if you can't fly them home, you have to park it, put it down somewhere, and then the Chinook will come and pick it up. It's like a tow truck. So I'm sure you've seen a tow truck before, picking up a car, taking it back to the repair shop. Well, that's the way they did it, with a big cable and a big helicopter. That top helicopter is a Chinook, a CH-47, and they still use those today. A different version of it, but that helicopter is very, very strong and very well put together. And it will also carry another Chinook underneath it that has so much power. You see the insignia on the nose of the helicopter, which is very common, was very common in Vietnam. All of our units, there were hundreds of them, we all took a lot of pride in our unit, and all of us had a different logo, you might say, on the front of our helicopter. And this was a clover with the swords. Okay, what that meant was our call sign was Shamrock, so we would call ourselves the Shamrocks. And I had a number, so my call sign was Shamrock 66. And each pilot, each aircraft commander had a different number. So all the numbers that were in the 60s were Hueys, and the 20s were the Cobras, and the teens were the Loaches, the observation. Go ahead. This may be hard to see, but I wanted to get this across to you. This is smoke. In this picture, it's red smoke, and it was showing a target. And also, we used smoke for other reasons too. If I was coming into a place where I needed to maybe drop food off, or to pick somebody up, and they would mark the area with a smoke. And they had different colors. And they would not tell me what color, because we were worried sometimes the enemy might be listening. And they would, if they could, they would pop a smoke somewhere nearby. So I would, they would say pop smoke, and I would see a smoke color, and if it was green, I would say green smoke. If it was purple, I'd say purple haze, or yellow, I would say mellow yellow, and then kind of made fun out of it a little bit. Yeah. So smoke was very important, and also showed us the direction, the position where they wanted us to land, and also the direction the wind was blowing, because that's always important, where the wind was blowing. You always wanted to land into the wind, especially when you're heavy, so you could get fresh air into the rotor system. Everybody's played volleyball here, right? Well, we played volleyball after our missions during the day. If we finished up early, we get together and play volleyball. And we called it volleyball with jungle rules. So you could grab the net and kind of break all the rules of volleyball, but we had fun. As long as you don't hit anybody, that's the main thing. So that was our entertainment and our exercise in the evening after a long day. And you can also see the two buildings there next door, and many of us lived in those buildings. And we would find a lot of wood. It was always available because they had a lot of rockets and grenades ammunition, and they were stored in wood. So as those items were used, we would take the wood and we would put it inside our hooches and build walls and furniture and do all kinds of things when we had time. Go ahead. Here I am. We had electricity. We were very fortunate there. We had no running water and no drains. And the only showers we had were two big tanks up top of the tower, like that. We would put a heater in it at a certain time of the day, and then a couple hours later it was warm enough to take a shower, and so we were fortunate there. But I always loved to play with wood, and my brother sent me a saw. We had electricity, so we were lucky there. And I was making things. You can see the boxes of ammo in the background here. And that's me 50 years ago. I was a lot skinnier back then. And my hair is a lot lighter now. Okay. This was inside of my room. I shared the room with 3 other pilots. And this is, you can see the bottom there, a chair that I had made and used an old army blanket as a cushion. And I had the walls, and I had some stereo items that I was able to pick up at the PX, Post Exchange. I had a fan, and I even had a television. There wasn't much TV to watch, but the Air Force out of station was on a few hours during the day, and they played some old reruns occasionally, and sometimes they would have a little bit of news or so on. So it was interesting. My lifestyle in the evening was pretty good for because I was a pilot and I lived in base camp, where many of the other veterans that were in the war had to spend time out in the jungle, and they were out there for weeks at a time before they would come back for a few days and have a rest. So I was very fortunate there. I'll never complain. But this was one of our maids. We had some ladies come in every day from town, and they would come in and would wash our clothes. They clean our rooms, make our beds. And this one here was very young, and she took care of one of our pet dogs. Yeah, we were able to have pets. So, yeah, this is a real cute one here. And you can see the buildings there where we lived in. Go ahead. This was an older lady, and we called her Mama-san. That was a term to be used for an older woman who worked. And also there's a red big 50-gallon drum to the left of her with pails, and that was our fire department. So if we happened to have a fire, which I'm glad I never had, we would dip those pails into the big drum of water, and like back 100 years, 150 years ago, you would hopefully put a fire out by throwing water on it. Go ahead. And here she is washing one of our other dogs. I think at that time I did smoke, and I gave her a pack of cigarettes for doing it. He wasn't all that happy about it, but he needed to be washed. I'm not sure if you can see it, but just below his head, below his ear, is a plate. And he's wearing a dog tag for a dog. Of course, the military always made you wear a dog tag, and I couldn't find mine this morning, I'm sorry. But it was a chain with a dog tag around it. And it would have your name and your service number, and also your religion and your blood type. So in case you got injured, the medics would be able to help you, and they would know your name and your blood type, and that would really help. So all of us carry dog tags. But in this case, our dog also had one. So I thought that was cute. Good. One of our she's cute, huh? One of our sergeants there had Well, we were told it was a orangutan, and I'm not familiar with monkeys, but he was really cute. He would jump all over you and hug you and play with you, so he was really a neat pet. And it broke the monotony of being over there and having a pet and feeling that way. Just like, I'm sure most of you have a cat or a dog at home, and you play with it, and you feel good about it, and he loves you, and she loves you. But we felt the same way, and it was important for us to have something like that with us. Go ahead. Yeah, beautiful shepherd. Now this shepherd was a working dog. Okay, a working dog. He would work with our troops. And we had several of these. Most of the time when we did a mission, we had one at a time. And he would go out, just like a policeman would have a canine with him in a car. And he would use that canine to help him do his job. Now, the job is different for him, this dog, because he was helping the troops. He would walk with a handler out in front of the soldiers. And if he could smell and was trained to alert his handler when he heard something or smelled something that wasn't right. So they were very, very good dogs. And they were very helpful. And I've read that they saved, over 5,000 of these dogs served in Vietnam. And they saved over 10,000 soldiers. Well, that's quite remarkable. So they were wonderful animals. Unfortunately, they didn't, when a handler went home, he had to give the dog to a new handler. So the dog stayed in Vietnam. So even though the handler became very close to his canine friend, he had to leave him and go home without him. That's one unfortunate part. I'm sure there's exceptions to that rule. I know during other wars that some soldiers have worked out a way to get their dog home. Many of them were just transferred to another handler after the war, during the war. Go ahead. Vietnam was beautiful. I mean, the vegetation, because of the moisture and the rain it had plenty of water, things grew very well over there. Next picture. Also, we had many beautiful sights like waterfalls and things. It was just beautiful. Am I running out of time?
No. You're good.
Good. And well, it was really a beautiful country there. And as pilots, we all had 35mm cameras. And one of the first things we did when we went over there, we bought those at the PX, and they were very reasonable in price. Go ahead. I flew over this mountain hill many times as a pilot. When I go between An and Pleiku, I flew over and I kind of felt I'm not saying funny, but felt that something's happened here. And there's words I can't really describe, but the French were in Vietnam before the Americans were. And they left in 1957. And just before that date, the French were going through this pass called the Mang Yang Pass. And they got attacked, surprise attacked. There were thousands of Frenchmen going through there with vehicles and other armor. And the communists at that time attacked them and when they were going through the pass and killed many of the Frenchmen. Very unfortunate. And the side, it's very hard to see, but the side of this mountain is covered with graves from the French soldiers who died there. So it's very humbling to fly over there and remember what happened during that time. Okay, anybody seen one of these before? Oh yeah, okay. You remember what they call it?
A penny.
A penny, yes. Well, the penny is there to show you the size of the tool. And most of our troops had that tool, which was a can opener, and they would hang it on their dog tags around their neck, and it would fold back so it wouldn't get hurt. And you would use that to open up your cans of food when you were out in the field. And they came in boxes, so you'd pick out which meal you'd like to have, and there were several cans in there of a meal and maybe a fruit cocktail or peaches and some other items that would, so you'd get your nourishment. And other things like matches and gum, and back then they even had a few cigarettes in the package. I remember eating a lot of those because we were gone all day on our mission some days. Some days we ate while we were flying, and some days we were on standby somewhere, and we would eat there on the ground. Go ahead. And here you see me warming up my food. I was in a village standing by, and I made myself a little heater with fuel from the helicopter and dirt, and I was warming up my meal. So I hated cold food, so this was worked out really good for me. But here you can see some of the villages in the background, and notice that they're on stilts because of the rain. Go ahead. This, I think, is probably the mayor's house of the folks that lived here were the indigenous natives of Vietnam. Indigenous means that they were the original people of the country. Just like the American Indian in the United States, or maybe the Aborigines in Australia, they were the original folks. And they didn't have any power tools. They had to do everything by hand. And they were very nice people. And our army, the special forces, took care of them. And their men fought the war alongside our men. And they were very good in the jungle. They knew how to survive. They lived in the jungle all their life, and they were very good to us and very honest and friendly, and they took care of our American soldiers very well. These are some of the kids that we would see when we go into a village and land, and we would stand by for maybe an hour or two waiting for something to happen, and when we'd get called up. But they'd always wait there for us, and we'd share our dinners with them, because we had our sea rations. Then remember the box I showed you with all different kinds of food in them, and gum and candy and crackers. And we gladly shared our lunches with them because it was really fun. They really liked us. We didn't quite know the language, but you don't really need to know the language to communicate. You just smile and pat them on the back and make faces or make gestures with your hands. But they were really nice children, very well behaved. There's 4 of them I took right together. I don't think the middle guy was fat because he was eating too much. He probably has some other issues, medical issues. Go ahead. Here's some more that I was giving candy to. Go ahead. Again. And you can see the background there. You can see I think it might be a horse or a goat in the background. I'm not sure. You notice that their homes are on stilts. Those homes, they were just for an average family that lived there. Mom, dad, maybe a couple of kids. Go ahead. He was walking down the trail, and he noticed I had a camera. He says, stood at attention and closed his eyes, him and his wife and kid, and they wanted me to take a picture of him. So that's really special. I took that picture out of my own camera. And she's probably been out in the fields picking up things and putting it in that basket on her back. Go ahead. There's There's a cute little young lady looking at us. That's the floor of the helicopter. Just looking at us. Do you have any candy for me? Well, of course we do. We always have candy for you. That picture would have been nice on maybe on the front of a Time magazine, wouldn't it? Yeah, very cute. Okay. This is an airborne picture. You can see the picture of the helicopter on the bottom. That's the shadow of the sun hitting it. And the hooch is there with the stills. It's kind of a neat picture. I was in town one day. This is in Pleiku. And lo and behold, I found an American car. Isn't that something? And two ladies there, very well dressed. They were very high up in status, I think. And having a nice car like that, they probably had maybe a tobacco farm or a rubber plantation or something like that. And both the enemy and the allies, we left them alone. It was part of our mutual agreement. Interesting, that car. It was just beautiful. It was almost brand new at that time. Okay. Another airfield, you see the helicopters down there in reenactments. Go ahead. Some days the enemy would leave their areas because they were scared of us. And I don't blame them. We had a lot of firepower. And they would leave their backpacks and their baskets and all their personal belongings because they were hiding from us. And we would take them back home and we would look through their backpacks. And it was very interesting to see how they lived. You know, they didn't really have a year or so and then go home. They were out fighting their war against us until the war was over. And I learned something very important to me through the years, and I've thought about it a lot. But these guys that were fighting us, they were just like you and I. They were normal people. I remember going through some of the backpacks. I found a folder in one of them. I opened it up, and I found letters they were writing to their families. I found pictures of them and their families. One young man was a sketch artist. He was sketching what he saw, and it really humbled me and realized our enemy are just like we are. They have families who they loved and they missed, and they couldn't wait to get home. Go ahead. This was around in May of 1970. I was in the shower. It was probably about 9 o'clock at night, and all of a sudden, all heck broke loose, and there was so much noise, and I could feel the ricochets of the bullets going through the building that I was in, because they were just the corrugated tin, the real thin walls, and they were making so much noise. I got so scared, and I laid on the floor, and the water was running on me. And it was full of suds from the soap, and the bullets, they flew around there for at least maybe 20, 30 minutes. Well, then the water ran out, and the noise stopped, and I got up and didn't really know what happened or anything. We figured we'd just wait until the following day and find out what happened. So the next day, go ahead. This was one of our observation helicopters. The enemy came through the wire, through the perimeter of the base camp, which was highly covered with wire, concertina wire, barbed wire, a lot of guards, and they got through somehow, and they blew up 8 of our observation helicopters. Excuse me, 9 of them. 9 observation helicopters, and also blew up my helicopter. I had just made aircraft commander and that was my helicopter. It was assigned to me, and I always flew it unless it was in being worked on in maintenance. But they opened up the door and they threw grenades inside the helicopter and blew it up, and it would not fly anymore. It would have to be sent back to the United States on a boat and be worked on, and hopefully it was flying again. And you see the picture in the bottom of the helicopter, the door that I, from the back, I put it out in front. It was the nickname of my helicopter is Iron Butterfly. If you've ever heard of that group, Iron Butterfly, it was a music group and it was very popular at that time. Good. My crew chief was really upset. It was his helicopter that blew up, and he says, "Sir, I don't think I'm going to be able to fix the helicopter. I know I can fix helicopters pretty well, but this is too far gone." So, about 2 days later, here I get a brand new helicopter. And it flew so nice. And I wasn't upset anymore. I got a brand new one. It flew so smooth, and it was so strong. It's like getting a new car. You know how they feel? And that smell. It's just really a good feeling. Okay. I wanted to give you a credit for some of the air ambulance pilots. We called them dust-off, and they had the red crosses on the nose and also on the doors. And they didn't have any machine guns because they, what their primary job was to pick up wounded soldiers. And if they picked up, from the time they got called, if they could get that soldier back to the hospital within an hour, in most cases he would be saved. So they called that the golden hour. So, and they would go into the hardest places. The casualty rate of the medevac or dust-off pilots and crew was much higher because they got hurt quite a bit. Because they went into they were just so dedicated to picking up wounded soldiers. They didn't care who was shooting at them or whatever. They were just, the important thing for them was to save the soldier. I did some of that too. If I was in an area and a soldier on the ground got hurt, and if I was able to land, I could take him and fly him to the hospital. We would save some time because we were already there, and I saved several soldiers who were wounded, and I checked on them, and they all survived, and I was very happy about that. The only thing is, I did lose one soldier, and I thought about that, but I never told anybody. But it was an enemy soldier who I picked up, and I was told to take him to the hospital. However, he was wounded so badly, and he did later die. So I felt kind of funny that one of the soldiers died on my helicopter, and that he was an enemy soldier. So that always kind of stuck with me. But that did happen a lot. If we were able to save an enemy, we would do it. We were really good people, and we still are. We have good hearts. Good. Here you can see another dust-off helicopter, and they're bringing in a wounded soldier, and they could place these cots inside the helicopter, wounded soldiers, so they could lay down. And one of the crew members in the back was like a paramedic. We called him a medic or a doc. Most of them were called doc for short. But they were medics, and they were trained, and they would also keep that person alive during the trip to the hospital. So I have a lot of respect for these pilots and crew members that did this. They were very, very, very dedicated to saving their fellow soldiers. Go ahead. Okay, that's hard to believe that is me. I was home at my parents' house. I had just completed 1 year, and I had signed an agreement to go back for another 6 months. And the reason I did that was so I could get out of the Army. Not that I hate the Army, but I wanted to get back to my regular job and be a civilian again. So that is 1 year after I got out. Of course, I only weighed 135 pounds. Now I'm quite a bit heavier. But I was really proud of being in Vietnam. I felt I did a lot of good. I never had any feelings that I can regret. I did my job. I did a good job. And I feel very good about it. You know, a lot of the veterans, when they came home from Vietnam, you may have heard, but many of them were not treated very well. Most of the other wars, they had parades, and they did night. People were really happy with them. But it was different for us. We were the same kind of people, same kind of veterans, but we weren't treated very well. The news and the anti-war people, they just made us look so bad, and it's unfortunate. So what I'd like you to do is, when you see the veterans wearing these hats, and a lot of them will say U.S. Army, Air Force, or Marines, even Coast Guard, Navy. If you see them, if you have time, walk up to them and say, thank you for your service. That'll really make them feel good. And some of them will say Vietnam veteran. Mine does, it's a little hard to see. And also, if you see that he's a Vietnam veteran, tell him, welcome home. And what that means is they weren't welcomed home very well when they came home. So that really makes a lot of them feel good. So, and we were very good soldiers over there. We were, the total number of soldiers that served in Vietnam were 2,900,000. That's almost 3 million soldiers that served in that country to help democracy and to get rid of the communists. And 58,000 of those numbers are on a wall in Washington, D.C. They call it the Vietnam Memorial Wall. If you ever go to Washington, D.C., make sure you see that wall. There are several monuments there for the veterans, and you can all go through there, but the one that's very dear to me is the Vietnam Veterans Wall. And I have several of the veterans and fellow soldiers that I served with that are on that wall. The wall means that they had died during the war, and in their memory, they are on that wall. So when you're in Washington, D.C., go take a look at that and look at all those names. There are over 58,000 of them that died during the Vietnam War. Go ahead. Okay, this is my final picture. And I think you can all read that. It says, what did you do in the Army, Grandpa? So they're always wondering, what did you do? And well, we would tell the kids, not much. We just drove the guys to work. So, meaning we drove them to work in our helicopters. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for letting me come out and speak to you. I was here a couple of years ago, and it was so awesome. And I got so many letters from all of you for 2 years ago, and I still have them. I've read them so many times. So if you feel like writing me a letter, I will promise you I'll read it 3 times. You know. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. I have no reservations, nothing about the war. I get sad sometimes from the people that have died and that I knew. I think about their families, and I easily get choked up and think about them and how their families are dealing with their loss. And many of them had children, and many mothers and fathers didn't see them anymore. So keep them in your hearts. Keep them all in your hearts. And thank you so much for having me.